Moving on to item 5D, presentation by the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council regarding the Chain of Lakes Blueway Trail project.
Kim Delaney for the record from Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council. So thanks for the opportunity to give us a chance to address the council on the Blueway's C51 project. Can we dim the lights? Thanks. And so this project has been in the works for about 2 years. Can we start the presentation, or should I just roll forward with it as it is? I guess
you can if you want.
So it's not really.
Did you turn it on the side?
On the side. On button would make a difference, wouldn't it? There's a green light now. There we go. Okay. So the Blueway's Chain of Lakes project is a project that the Palm Beach MPO, the Metropolitan Planning Organization, of which the mayor's a member and several council members have been as well, envisioned as a way to enhance mobility on the waterways in Palm Beach County, add economic development, and improve quality of life. So the project came out of the Palm Beach MPO, and at this point, it's advanced to a project that's a conceivable project. I think that's probably the best way to describe it. The C51, of course, has a saltwater control structure that prevents access from the Chain of Lakes, which lies to the west, and the Intracoastal Waterway to the east. And so this would be the first type of project in Palm Beach County, to open up that access, but certainly not the first in Florida. There are other precedents to use. And there's a similar model of the type of lift that's envisioned up in the town of Juno Beach that's been operational for about 35 or 40 years. The Chain of Lakes, as it's referred to, is that interior chain of lakes that exists west of I-95. It runs about 26 miles. Due west of the city of Lake Worth, of course, is Lake Clark, which is the immediate water body, and then it extends, of course, north and south for a pretty substantial distance. The spillway, of course, at the C51 has the saltwater control structure that you can see that's illustrated in the image on this slide. That structure would remain, but the project would allow boats to move around that saltwater control structure in a lift mechanism. So boats from the interior chain of lakes could get out to the intercoastal, and then boats that are in the intercoastal can get into the interior chain as well. One of the advantages for opening that access, of course, is not just economic development opportunities, which are always opportunities that municipalities look for, but also the quality of life enhancements that come from that. So paddleboarding, kayaking, and non-motorized vessels would also have a way to formally move back and forth around that control structure. Right now you can kind of see the goat trail where people drag their kayaks up the bank. Not the best condition, so if we want to advance that type of recreational opportunity, this is a safer way to do it that kind of formalizes that and makes it easier to get around that structure. One of the things to think about with respect to the types of vessels that would be able to be accommodated in the project is that the lift would enable boats up to about 25 feet to move around that structure. That covers about 80% of all the registered vessels in Palm Beach County. So the vast majority of people in Palm Beach County have boats that are that size, and the structure is designed to move just that type of vessel. As I mentioned, the ecotourism opportunities are a really nice complement to the types of planning the city of Lake Worth has always celebrated. When Palm Beach County developed the waterways plan for the Intracoastal in Palm Beach County, the idea of a marina village that has an ecotourism highlight was the type of destination that Lake Worth had always envisioned. And this type of facility will really enhance that and allow the city to expand on that benefit and that unique series of resources like Smith Island to create better access to that. What I've always found in planning is if you could put people on a kayak, they become environmentalists within an hour. So that type of access isn't good just for an ecotourism standpoint, but it's also a way to really advance environmental stewardship, which is certainly a priority within all the cities, and Lake Worth as a leader in that area. Ecotourism, of course, is really a growing trend across the state and in Palm Beach County. And so with ecotourism, the opportunities that expand in the city, for example, for lodging and hospitality, for restaurants and commercial development are just enhanced by that. The other industry that's really important to emphasize is the marine industries. Marine industries employ about 30,000 people in Palm Beach County. There are a wide variety of job categories that are expanded by that. So everything from boat sales, provisioning, repairs, bait tackle and fishing, and marinas themselves as well. All those job categories really expand when we have more access and more opportunity for folks to enjoy the waterways. So going forward, the legislature in the last session graciously funded a preliminary feasibility study for the project to test it, to see if it can work, and advance the conceptual plans that have been designed thus far. That planning process is underway in this next year. The city, of course, would be asked to participate in that process, along with the city of West Palm Beach, the town of Lake Clark Shores, and all the other stakeholder interests, to make sure that all the important topics are addressed, and everyone's interests can be represented as we test this to see whether or not we have a feasible project, what the costs might be, and how it might be carried forward. There is a lot of support for the project. This slide just lists some of the entities that have actually taken positions of support to try to advance the project, both public sector and private sector interests, environmental groups, the Marine Industries Association of Palm Beach County, various recreational organizations, municipalities, and agencies like the ones that are noted, along with small business owners. This slide is a little tough to read, and I'm in the front of the room. But I think one of the quotes that's a nice catch-all at the bottom of the slide, so in the tiniest print on there, is from the owner of Tuppence, which of course is down the street in the city, and the owner emphasizes that more people on the water will help local businesses, and he emphasizes that whole range of business classes that are advanced, from restaurants to convenience stores to bait and tackle shops to recreational facilities. It's kind of the rising tide lifts all boats. This is the type of project that really lifts all sectors of the economy. And so with that very brief presentation, hopefully I was under my 7 minutes as I was asked to be. I'm happy to answer questions for you if you have them. I'll be the project manager for the Regional Planning Council as we try to take the project through the feasibility study process in the next year. We're optimistic, as we always are at the council, but would look for the city's feedback, of course, and participation in that effort as the project carries forward.
Okay. Commissioner Blair?
Thank you. Looking at your 4th slide, it's talking about the chain of lakes cannot be accessed from the intercoastal waterway, and goes on to say there is a solution. I'm connecting that to the boat lift. That is the solution. I've heard concerns there about the amount of time that it takes the boat lift to actually function. It's a good 20 to 25 minutes just to get one boat from one side of the lift to the other side of the lift. Has there been any talk about how that timing issue is going to be addressed? Because if we're saying we can put 80% of the boats that are in the state in this waterway, how do we handle traffic? And certainly that would create a traffic jam.
Sure. It's a good question, because the numbers that we've seen are a little different. It's maybe 8 minutes, 10 minutes max to get a boat across. So if there's 2 lifts working, it's one moving in either direction. So the time is lesser. The kayak portage would work separately from that, and so that kind of increases the access right back and forth. The project, as it's being designed, is looking at all of the best technologies that are out there. So if there are mechanisms to move those boats more quickly, we will identify those. But in terms of timing, that's kind of the quantity I think that we're envisioning at this point. Maybe 6, 7 perhaps in an hour in each direction. And that's, it's not envisioned to be necessarily a very high volume facility, but again, it creates that access. Busier on the weekend, not as busy during the week. A manned facility, so there's surveillance out there, which is missing now in the waterway. But a good question that you asked, I'm glad that you did, so we could talk about that timing issue. And one of the things that we'll look at as we look at the feasibility of the
Thank you. Also, a number of people have, I happen to live up in the College Park area, and there were a lot of concerned citizens because the feasibility report showed, number one, Lake Worth being the sole, I understand, and I had asked questions about that at a recent meeting that y'all had in regards to it, and said that that was put in there for the study purposes only, but there was no accounting for what portion Lake Worth is going to control, not control, but to actually show what could be done, how it could be done, and that you're still way in the far investigation stages of this. I would just say that from my neighborhood's standpoint, that the biggest concern is traffic, as Commissioner Meyer said. The other thing is also having a voice in the input of traffic slowdown, so to speak, in it. There's manatees in that area. There's lots of wildlife in that area. Also in reference to their homes are accessed off that land, so for safety and security purposes, whether or not there's anything is going into it. So I think that there would be definitely neighborhood or at least neighbors interested in becoming a part of an advisory type of committee as decisions are made, and I know that decisions are being made all the way up to Lois Frankel, all the way down to whatever, but I know that it's Lake Worth, and I know that our residents would very much like to be a part of that planning process as things go through, and they would like to have, there's nothing set in stone, and these discussions are still moving forward, and I think there's a lot of support for a lot of the ecotourism things in it, and also some of even the water quality issues that were discussed along the way a long time ago, was certainly as we're dealing with this current dilemma in our spillway area. I'm sure some of those things might be additionally addressed, but just know that Lake Worth would like to, especially the residents living along that corridor, would like a voice.
Absolutely, and the council would be looking to the city
to
identify how it wants to participate.
Okay.
So the council is trying to facilitate this process, but this project is a municipal project at the end of the day. So what we're envisioning in terms of framing out the evaluation process, we look to the city for representation, the city of West Palm and town of Lake Park Shores as well. Palm Beach County's DERM, which is the Department of Environmental Resource Management, which is probably the best entity to ensure that any environmental protection issues, resource habitat issues are addressed as a primary aspect of the study. They'd be participating directly, as well as marine industries folks who understand how the boats need to move back and forth.
Right.
So that's kind of what we're envisioning, and we look to the city mayor for as extensive a piece of participation as the city feels is appropriate.
I can assure you all the kayakers will be really happy not to have to portage their kayaks over Dixie Highway. Remember how they do it? They have to carry them across Dixie.
Yeah, it's kind of a long drag.
It certainly is backbreaking. Okay, but I'm sure this is just the start of the discussion. So.
Absolutely.
All right.
So in fact, we haven't even had an opportunity to issue an RFQ yet to get firms to propose.
Okay.
So we're at the very beginning of the process, and again, we would very much hope the city would be playing a primary role in helping guide the study as it goes forward.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I'm going to follow a little bit on the mayor's comments. I have had some input already and a while back from folks that live along the canal on the Lake Worth side of it, and you can imagine they're not very enthusiastic. It's no benefit to them. It's kind of like saying you live on a small country road somewhere and somebody says, hey, we were just thinking if we could put I-95 right there, that would get these folks from here to there. And the folks from here to there might think that's a great idea, and the people who are on that country road think, how does this help me out? And I guess, I hear a willingness on your part to take input, but what if the word is, we just don't really want it? What do you do with that?
And there's going to be this, really the city is going to be the primary decision maker in this. The property along that canal is in the city limits. Mm-hmm. So at the end of the day, the decision is going to be, I think, mostly the city of Lake Worth's decision as the project's envisioned.
And I guess a piece that's that comes in also is that if you were to look at boat ownership in the city of Lake Worth, to the extent that there is any, it's the folks right there who are not benefiting it because they're already on the intercoastal or on that piece of the canal. Almost very few other people are going to have a benefit. The benefit happens to the communities inland that are along the canals and so on. So I foresee a little bit of difficulties as far as this helping out with kayaks across Dixie Highway. I would respectfully submit that the folks in the kayaks will go under, they'll go through the canal underneath Dixie Highway, which is what they're doing now, if they're doing it at all. So this doesn't have any effect on that. Is that not correct?
Actually, no. What they would be doing is going around the saltwater.
No. I'm talking about Dixie Highway as a barrier to east-west movement of a kayak.
It's not Dixie. It's
Exactly.
It's
That's my point. Dixie's irrelevant to it for a kayak. It's actually irrelevant to it for the bigger boats too. That's where your 5.5-foot height limit comes in.
Right.
And I think if the concern is kayaks and ecotourism, I just would put, and I don't want to be a wet blanket on the project, but I'm part of the community that, well, I not personally, but I represent the community that does have people who primarily have concerns. Folks who are kayaking, most of them are not going to go on the C-51. It's not that attractive a kayak destination. They're going to put in Snook Islands or something or other like that, and they don't mind schlepping a kayak around the thing. That's not that big a deal. Portaging, that's why their community is called portage, because it means to carry. So it's not a big benefit for people-powered ones and the ecotourism kind of things. It's not an area, the C-51 is not one of those places that, you know, you read about it in guidebooks in Michigan and say, hey, I think I'll go to Lake Worth and check it out. So I think we want to be a little bit realistic on a couple things. One of them, Commissioner Meyer's comment on, let's get some actual numbers on flow rates of boats and how that would get communicated back to all those boats that now have access to the ocean, but may or may not, because they aren't going to want to sit and wait for an hour for all the other boats to get ahead of them. So let's try to get some realistic numbers of what those would be, and maybe some realistic scenarios on the ecotourism. Is this really, you know, a destination that which kinds of boats and users would be using? I think it's easy to be optimistic about it, but from the point of view of Lake Worth, I'm not sure that there's necessarily.
I actually pulled that whole thing with portage and ecotourism from former Commissioner Mulville. She was the one who talked about that when Snook Islands was first being launched, and those were her specific comments regarding the spillway in that whole area. So I brought that just up from my previous conversation of it, because that was her experience there, because she was quite a kayaker and used to frequent that area. That's the only reason why I brought that up. The other access is the spillway. It's in the city of West Palm Beach on one side and Lake Worth on the other side. Who owns the spillway?
The water management.
Okay. Who owns Spillway Park?
The city of Lake Worth controls it. The land, I think, is owned by the Water Management District of Park, and then a portion of the property that fronts the road is owned by the city.
And who owns the C-51 canal?
That's a district canal.
Now, is the C-51 canal different than the canals along, say, the next streets over, or whatever is?
Yes.
And what is that difference?
They vary in ownership and control.
Okay. That one is a federally owned.
Well,
The waterway, Water Management District?
I think it's state, yeah.
State owned, okay. Okay, all right, well, we're gonna have lots of conversations, I'm sure.
That's the intent of the study.
Okay,
To have
well,
this conversation.
we'll come on back, I'm sure we'll have one. Thank you.
Very good. Thanks.
All right.